Most people look at a 10-minute walk and see absolutely nothing worth their time. They see something too short to count, too easy to work, too gentle to create any real change. We've been conditioned to believe that fat loss only happens when we're gasping for air and dripping in sweat. So when someone suggests that just 10 minutes of walking could actually matter, the mind instantly rejects it. It sounds too good to be true, too simple to be effective, too easy to produce real results. But here's what almost nobody understands about those 10 minutes. While your conscious mind is dismissing it as meaningless, something profound is happening deep inside your body. Something invisible, something that has nothing to do with how many calories you've burned. Because the truth is, those first 10 minutes were never designed to burn fat at all. They were designed to do something far more important for your body. They were designed to change a single critical decision that determines everything. A decision that controls whether your visceral fat ever gets released or stays locked away forever. Picture this for a moment. Someone who's been sitting all morning finally steps outside. No intense workout planned. No fitness tracker screaming at them to hit their goals. No aggressive mindset pushing them to perform. Just simple, easy movement. One foot in front of the other. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive. From the outside, nothing dramatic appears to be happening at all. The scale isn't moving. The calorie counter barely registers any activity. The muscles aren't burning with that familiar ache that makes people feel accomplished. To anyone watching, it looks like absolutely nothing of value is taking place. But inside that person's body, an entirely different story is unfolding.
A story most people never learn about because it doesn't fit what we've been sold. In those first 10 minutes, something subtle but powerful begins happening. Your nervous system starts asking a question, a quiet question most people don't even know exists. It's asking whether the environment around you is safe or whether it's demanding, whether you're being chased by something dangerous or simply moving peacefully through space. This might sound like a strange question for your body to be asking, but it matters more than almost anything else when it comes to visceral fat. Because visceral fat, that stubborn fat wrapping around your organs, doesn't respond to effort. It doesn't care how hard you're trying or how much willpower you're using. It responds to something entirely different. It responds to context. This is the part that almost nobody talks about in fitness. Before your fat cells will release anything, before your metabolism speeds up, something has to happen first. Your body has to interpret the signal it's receiving from your movement. It has to decide whether what you're doing feels like stress or safety, whether it feels like a threat or stability, protection or permission. And those 10 minutes are exactly enough time for that interpretation to begin. Not enough time to force fat loss, not enough time to see dramatic changes, but absolutely enough time to unlock the door that makes fat loss possible later. This is why you'll notice something interesting about people who walk consistently. They often change their bodies without ever feeling like they're pushing themselves hard. Meanwhile, others are grinding harder, restricting their food more, suffering through brutal workouts.
And yet, they feel completely stuck, unable to understand why their visceral fat won't respond. But something has already shifted in those quiet, gentle first 10 minutes of walking. Something invisible, but absolutely critical to your body's fat loss process. Because fat loss doesn't start when fat begins to burn in your body. It starts the moment your body decides it no longer needs to desperately hold on. Let me take you inside what's actually happening during those first 10 minutes. When you start walking, your body isn't thinking about fat at all. It's not concerned with your weight loss goals or your fitness targets. It's focused entirely on sensing, interpreting, and updating its internal understanding. As your feet begin hitting the ground, your muscles start contracting rhythmically. Tiny electrical signals shoot from those working muscles straight into your nervous system. This happens immediately, before your heart rate has time to rise in any meaningful way, before your breathing pattern changes, long before any measurable calorie burn takes place. Your body is gathering information. It's collecting data about what's happening right now. And muscle contraction, this simple rhythmic movement, is one of the most powerful biological signals you can send. Here's something remarkable that happens without you even being aware of it. Without asking insulin for any kind of permission, those working muscle fibers start pulling glucose directly out of your bloodstream. Blood sugar begins to stabilize quietly, smoothly, without any dramatic spikes or crashes. This shift changes how your body feels internally, even if you're completely unaware it's happening. At the exact same time, your nervous system begins to shift its tone.
Not in some dramatic way, not in a way you'd consciously notice, but enough to matter, enough to change the internal conversation your body is having. The sympathetic system, the one responsible for your fight or flight response, that constant threat signal starts to soften, just slightly, just enough to let your body know that everything is okay. Meanwhile, the parasympathetic system begins coming back online in your body. This is the system associated with safety, with digestion, with recovery, with feeling calm instead of constantly on edge and ready to fight. This doesn't mean all your stress suddenly disappears from your life. It means stress is no longer completely dominating the conversation your body is having with itself. Your liver responds next in this beautiful chain of automatic events. As your muscles are actively taking up glucose, your liver automatically adjusts how much sugar it releases. This coordination happens without you thinking about it, without any willpower required, without needing discipline or motivation, just movement creating automatic biological responses. And cortisol, that hormone everyone blames for stubborn belly fat, it's not dropping yet, but it is being reinterpreted by your body in a completely different way. Walking sends a very specific message that says energy is being used, but not under threat. That distinction is absolutely critical to understand for visceral fat loss, because cortisol behaves completely differently during calm, rhythmic movement than it does under pressure. Your heart joins this process quietly in the background without you noticing. Cardiac output increases just enough to improve circulation without triggering any alarm bells. Oxygen delivery improves throughout your body, reaching every cell more efficiently. Carbon dioxide clears more efficiently from your system, improving overall function. These changes are subtle. You won't feel them dramatically in the moment. But together, they're shifting your internal chemistry away from defense mode and toward balance. And then there's your brain, constantly monitoring and updating its predictions. As this gentle movement continues without any strain, your brain begins updating its prediction model. It recognizes that movement doesn't equal danger in this moment, that effort isn't being punished, that resources are actually available and not scarce. This prediction update matters enormously because your brain is the ultimate gatekeeper. It makes the final decision about whether fat gets released or stays locked away. Visceral fat cells are not just passive storage units sitting there waiting to be burned. They're highly sensitive, highly protected, and deeply connected to both hormonal and neural signals. They're constantly listening for stress, listening for instability in your environment. They're listening for any sign that energy might be urgently needed in the future. During those first 10 minutes of walking, those fat cells aren't releasing anything yet, but they are receiving new information that directly contradicts chronic stress, information that suggests rhythm instead of chaos, stability instead of threat, information that tells them the body is active, but definitely not under attack. This is invisible biology, nothing you can see with your eyes, nothing you can measure with any fitness tracker or app on your phone, but it's everything that determines what happens next in your body's fat loss journey. Because before your body will ever allow visceral fat to be accessed and used for energy, something has to happen first. It has to believe that letting go of that fat won't be dangerous, and that belief starts forming long before any actual fat burning ever begins. This is exactly where most people unknowingly get completely stuck in their journey. They're moving their bodies, they're following plans they found online, they're adding intensity to their workouts, increasing duration, pushing harder, trying to force results through pure effort. And still, their visceral fat barely responds. It stays stubbornly in place. This isn't happening because they're lazy. It's not happening because their bodies are broken. It's happening because a critical lever was never pulled in the first place. In that lever is permission, metabolic permission to release stored fat. Visceral fat is not stored for appearance. Your body doesn't care how you look in the mirror. It stores visceral fat for survival. It wraps that fat around your vital organs for a reason. Your body treats it as emergency energy that might be needed if things go wrong. As long as your internal environment feels uncertain, unstable, or threatened in any way, that energy stays locked. It doesn't matter how many calories you burn doing other activities, or how hard you work out. The fat stays protected because your body believes it needs that protection. This is exactly why so many people can walk for an hour, run for miles, or exhaust themselves completely, and still see almost no change around their abdomen, where visceral fat lives. Their bodies are active, yes, but they're still operating in defensive mode. Movement is happening, but the context surrounding that movement is telling their body to hold on tight.
To not let go, to keep that protection in place at all costs. The missing lever isn't effort. It's not discipline or willpower. It's not about pushing yourself harder than you already are every single day. The missing lever is metabolic permission, permission to release stored energy. Those 10 minutes of walking don't force fat cells to release energy through intensity. What they do instead is far more important for long-term sustainable results. They begin telling your body that movement can exist without threat or danger, that energy can be used without panic, that the environment is predictable and stable. Stable enough to stop constantly preparing for disaster that might never come. Most people never reach their visceral fat because they skip this step entirely. They jump straight into intensity, urgency, and pressure from day one. Their nervous system immediately interprets all of that as stress and threat. Cortisol rises with purpose, doing exactly what it's designed to do in threatening situations. Insulin becomes protective, locking things down, and fat cells get the message to stay closed. But when movement starts gently, rhythmically, without any sense of demand or threat, the message changes. Your body is no longer being challenged to survive something difficult. It's being invited to participate in something safe and sustainable for the long term. This is why short, calm movement often does more for visceral fat than long, exhausting workouts. Not because it burns more calories in that moment, but because it changes the decision-making process. In those first 10 minutes, your body begins to loosen its grip, not on the fat itself yet, but on the fear that makes holding on to that fat feel necessary. That's the lever most people never pull, and without pulling it, no amount of effort compensates. Fat loss doesn't begin when you've burned enough energy through hard work. It begins when your body decides it's safe enough to stop storing that energy. Once that permission begins forming in your body, something beautiful happens. A series of benefits quietly stack on top of each other, long before any visible fat loss shows up. This is where most people completely underestimate the power of short, consistent walking. They're looking for one dramatic outcome, one big change they can see immediately, instead of recognizing the many small biological shifts happening all at once. As walking continues past those first few minutes, your blood sugar becomes more stable, not lower, not depleted, just steadier and more predictable throughout the day. Fewer spikes throughout the day means less internal urgency in your system. Less urgency means your body doesn't need to overcorrect with insulin anymore. And when insulin stops overcorrecting, your fat cells stop receiving constant storage signals. At the same time, cortisol begins to flatten out throughout the day. Not crash, not disappear completely. It simply loses its sharp, stressful edges. The peaks become lower and less extreme. The valleys become less dramatic. This matters tremendously because visceral fat responds more to cortisol rhythm than total amount. A smoother, more predictable rhythm tells your body that energy demand is stable. Inside your cells, your mitochondria start adjusting how they handle fuel sources. They're not switching fully to burning fat yet, but they're becoming more flexible. This flexibility is absolutely critical for long-term metabolic health.
A body that can move easily between different fuels doesn't panic when glucose changes, and a body that doesn't panic doesn't desperately cling to visceral fat. Your brain also benefits in ways most people never connect to fat loss. Gentle movement increases blood flow to specific regions involved in emotional regulation. Your brain becomes slightly less reactive to stress, slightly more observational. This subtle shift reduces background stress signaling throughout your entire body. Inflammatory signals begin to soften as well throughout your system. Low-grade inflammation, which almost always accompanies chronic stress and poor sleep, thrives in stillness combined with pressure. Walking interrupts that inflammatory environment without provoking any defensive response. None of these individual changes are dramatic on their own when looked at separately, but together they create an entirely new internal landscape in your body. One where using energy feels normal instead of urgent or threatening. One where movement feels safe instead of demanding or punishing. One where storing fat as protection becomes less and less necessary. This is benefit stacking at its finest, the way biology actually works. You're not directly chasing fat loss through force and willpower. You're stacking conditions that make fat loss the natural, inevitable outcome. By the time your body even considers releasing visceral fat, many benefits are already in place. Blood sugar is calmer and more regulated. Hormones are more cooperative. Your nervous system is less guarded. Your brain is no longer constantly signaling threat. And this is exactly why 10 minutes of walking can matter so much more than it appears. Not because it directly burns fat in that moment, but because it prepares your body.
Prepares it to eventually allow fat to leave when the time is right. Fat loss is rarely the first benefit you'll notice from this approach. It's usually the very last one to show up, arriving only after everything else works properly. What makes this even more compelling is that these effects aren't just theoretical ideas. They've been observed repeatedly across different populations in research studies, in ways that quietly contradict what most people have been told about fat loss. When researchers study light walking after meals, they don't see dramatic calorie expenditure. That's not what catches their attention or gets published in journals. What they see instead is rapid improvement in how the body handles glucose. Muscles begin clearing sugar from the bloodstream almost immediately after starting to walk, dramatically reducing the need for insulin to spike in response to food. This matters because insulin is one of the strongest signals telling visceral fat to stay locked. Other studies looking specifically at low-intensity movement show something similar with cortisol. Gentle, rhythmic activity doesn't eliminate cortisol from your system completely. Instead, it reshapes the pattern. It smooths out the sharp peaks. Those sharp stress-driven peaks soften significantly, especially when walking becomes consistent. And it's precisely those peaks, not your baseline levels, that are most associated with visceral fat. There's also fascinating evidence from metabolic studies showing the body prioritizes fuel flexibility first. Before fat loss ever occurs, the machinery needs to be tuned properly. Early gentle movement increases the activity of specific enzymes involved in switching between fuels.
This doesn't mean fat is being burned immediately during that 10-minute walk. It means the machinery inside your cells is being tuned and optimized for later. And without that tuning process, fat loss later becomes inefficient and unsustainable. Even brain imaging studies support this pattern clearly and consistently. Low-intensity walking measurably increases blood flow to brain areas involved in executive function. In practical terms, this reduces background threat perception throughout the day. A brain that perceives less threat sends fewer emergency signals to the rest of the body, and fewer emergency signals mean far less reason to cling to energy reserves. What's truly important here is not any single study in isolation. It's the clear pattern they all point toward when looked at together. Your body responds to walking long before it responds with fat loss. Your heart, muscles, liver, and brain all adapt first. Then fat follows. Your fat cells wait patiently, and that waiting isn't resistance or stubbornness. It's caution. It's your body being careful with precious emergency reserves. Visceral fat is metabolically active, hormonally sensitive, and deeply tied to survival. Research consistently shows it responds best when stress is reduced and insulin is stabilized. When movement is predictable, not extreme, not punishing, but predictable. This is why those 10 minutes can matter so profoundly for your results. Not because they cross some magical threshold of calorie burn or intensity, but because it's enough time for these critical systems to register a genuine change. Enough time for glucose handling to improve, for cortisol signaling to soften. Enough time for your nervous system to update its expectations about what movement means.
Science doesn't show fat loss beginning at minute 10 of walking. What it shows is preparation beginning there, the foundation being laid. And preparation is what determines whether fat loss ever becomes possible at all. When people skip this crucial phase and chase intensity from day one, they override the signals. They override the very signals visceral fat needs to hear to feel safe. The science is absolutely clear on this point, even if popular fitness culture ignores it. The body changes its mind before it ever changes its shape. This is also where many people accidentally undo the exact effect they're trying to create. Not because they're doing something obviously wrong on the surface, but because the signal they're sending doesn't match the biology they actually need. One of the most common mistakes is turning walking into a stress test, speeding up too quickly, forcing a pace that feels tense and uncomfortable, treating the walk like a workout that has to prove its worth through suffering. The moment your breathing becomes strained, your body feels like it's being chased. Your nervous system instantly flips back into defense mode. Cortisol sharpens. The message changes completely from safety to threat in a single moment. Another massive mistake is mental pressure during the walk itself. Walking while obsessively thinking, this has to burn fat, this has to work. Constantly watching the clock, counting steps obsessively like your worth depends on it. Measuring the value of your walk purely by calories burned on your tracker. Your body doesn't separate physical stress from psychological stress at all. They're processed the same way. Urgency in your mind becomes urgency in your body. And urgency tells visceral fat to stay exactly where it is for protection.
Some people stack walking on top of an already severely stressed system. Poor sleep for weeks, heavy caffeine consumption all day, aggressive calorie restriction, extended fasting periods. Then they add walking and expect their body to feel relief. Instead, the body interprets this combination as scarcity plus demand. The signal becomes, resources are critically limited, so hold on to everything we have. There's also the mistake of pairing walking with punishment and guilt, using it to make up for eating something you feel guilty about, walking out of shame, walking with frustration and anger at your body. Emotionally, this might feel harmless. You're just trying to fix a mistake. Biologically, it matters enormously. Your body responds to emotional framing. Movement that's framed as punishment does not feel safe to your body. None of these errors completely cancel walking itself or its potential benefits, but they do cancel the message walking is supposed to send. The goal of those first 10 minutes is not effort or achievement, it's reassurance. It's telling your body clearly and consistently something important, that movement can happen without threat, without urgency, without negative consequences. When that message gets distorted by stress, pressure, or punishment, the effect weakens or disappears entirely, leaving you wondering why walking isn't working for you. This is why some people insist walking doesn't work for fat loss. It's not the walking that failed them, it's that the signal never landed. Visceral fat doesn't respond to how hard you're trying or how much you want results. It responds to how safe the environment feels while you're moving through it. And when walking becomes just another source of pressure and stress in your life, your body protects itself. Seen through this lens, those 10 minutes of walking stop being a workout altogether. They become something else entirely, something far more powerful than exercise. They become a biological message rather than a physical demand. Those first 10 minutes are not about burning fuel or hitting targets. They're about rewriting context, changing the story your body tells itself. They tell your nervous system that movement is completely normal, not threatening. They tell your liver that energy is being used in a controlled, sustainable way. They tell your brain that the environment is stable enough to stop preparing for emergencies. This reframing changes absolutely everything about how your body responds. Instead of asking yourself, how much fat did I burn today? Ask a different question. The far more accurate and useful question becomes, what signal did I send to my body? Because that signal determines whether your fat cells ever become negotiable. When walking is approached as communication rather than compensation, your body responds differently. Stress hormones lose their sharp urgency. Insulin becomes cooperative instead of defensive. Fuel flexibility improves, not through force or willpower, but through biological trust. Over time, this signal compounds powerfully in your system. Your body begins to expect calm, regular movement as part of normal life.
cortisol rhythms smooth out naturally, blood sugar regulation becomes more efficient, your nervous system spends less time scanning for threats and more time supporting repair. And this is when visceral fat finally starts to change its behavior. Not suddenly, not dramatically overnight, but gradually and steadily, as your body learns that it no longer needs that extra protective layer.
The fat was never stubborn or resistant to your efforts. It was cautious. It was protecting you from what it perceived as danger. Those 10 minutes of walking are not a fat loss hack or a secret trick. They're a permission slip, a quiet, repeatable reminder that energy can move freely, that effort doesn't always come with consequences, that survival mode isn't necessary anymore. When that message is sent consistently, day after day, week after week, your body adapts, and fat loss stops feeling like an exhausting battle you have to fight. It starts becoming a natural side effect of restored biological trust. This is why people who walk regularly often struggle to explain exactly why it works. They're not doing anything extreme or impressive, not chasing intensity or suffering. They're simply changing the conversation their body is having with itself. And once that conversation changes at a deep biological level, the body's decisions change too. If you take anything meaningful from this, let it be this simple truth. You don't need to do more. You don't need to push harder. And you definitely don't need to turn walking into another problem to solve. Instead, try something simpler and far more powerful than force. The next time you walk, don't frame it as fat loss at all. Don't measure it obsessively by steps, pace, or calories burned. Just give your body 10 completely uninterrupted minutes of calm, rhythmic movement. Let your breathing stay easy and natural. Let your thoughts soften instead of racing. Let the movement feel ordinary, unremarkable, not demanding or impressive. Then notice carefully what happens afterward, not on the scale, because that's not where you'll see it first. Look inside your body instead.
Notice how your appetite behaves differently, how your stress feels later in the day, how your body responds to the food you eat, how your energy stabilizes. Do that consistently for just 1 week, not to force change or demand results, but simply to observe what shifts quietly in your internal experience. Because when fat loss is driven by biology instead of pressure, it doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up quietly as better regulation, improved tolerance, and less guardedness. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need ideal conditions. You don't even need motivation or willpower to start this process. You just need to send the right signal often enough for your body to trust it. Those 10 minutes are not about effort or achievement or proving anything. They're about permission. Permission for your body to finally let go. And when your body finally feels safe enough to let go of what it's been holding, fat loss stops being something you desperately chase. It starts becoming something that simply happens naturally while you're living your life.